Greetings, race fans, and welcome to today's top split action from the Radical Esports Cup presented by RaceSpot TV. J.R. Gregory here with you on the call, covering for Ewan O'Leary, who is busy covering the Sim Racing Expo for the next 3 days, along with my partner, Racing Ron Mons, and our producer, Ramiro Agustin Cisneros. And as 2025 Season 4 rolls on, Week 5 takes us to Algarve. This track opened in 2008 in Portimao, Portugal, current host to Grand Prix Motorcycle Racing, World Superbikes, European Le Mans Series, and past host, of course, to the Portuguese Grand Prix and World Endurance Championship. This track is 4.6 clicks, 2.9 miles, and 15 corners. Our current race lap record of 118.750 was set by Lewis Hamilton back in 2020. And Ron, this season's schedule takes us to 7 past or present Formula One circuits, plus a couple of classic IndyCar and endurance venues. And like many of those others, Portimao really lets these radicals shine.
Yeah, this track is one that we haven't seen a lot of in the past here in the Radical SR10 official ranks. However, it puts on some pretty good racing, as we have seen thus far this week and have seen in the past. It's part of a very diverse calendar that we've got here for Season 4 of 2025. You look at the races that we've already had: Canadian Tire Motorsports Park for week number 1, the Nordschleife for week 2, Imola, Belle Isle last time out, of course, Portimao here today. Then you look ahead, the likes of Zandvoort, Mid-Ohio, the Hockenheim Ring, Monza, Watkins Glen, Le Mans, and Road Atlanta to follow. A very unique calendar with some tracks that we either haven't seen too much of here in the Radical Esports Cup, or ones that we just haven't seen, period. In the case of Le Mans, venturing off into the unknown a little bit later on in this season, as we get to the end of this second half, we already have a good idea as to who's going to be contending for this official series title.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing these cars out on Le Mans. And speaking of points, there they are. Andreas Friedrich, pretty comfortable lead, about 200 points ahead of P2. Heinz Braun, Peter Avani rounding out the podium, followed by Haver Gullikson, Sauli Reitinen, Paki Caruso, George Gonzaga, Andre Castro, James Berry, and Lucas Vieira. And on that list, Gullikson, Castro, Berry, who's who of past champions of the Radical Esports Cup. And we're going to see many of those drivers here on track today. And really looking forward to Portimao run. I remember covering this event at this track a couple of seasons ago, and the setup was a little iffy. And according to James Berry, who I had an opportunity to chat to prior to the broadcast, they've softened the springs. The setup is a little kinder, so the drivers are going to have a little easier time getting these cars around Algarve today. And folks, if you're not familiar with the Radical SR10, this car is one of the purest sports car experiences on iRacing, propelled by a 450 horsepower 4-cylinder turbo, a full 1,000 pounds lighter than an MX-5 Cup car, no traction control, no ABS. The SR10 can be a handful, but as I've said many times before, mastery of this car will make you better at every car that you drive. And speaking of driving these SR10s, I also want to remind you, this is not a private or league event. We're broadcasting the iRacing officials here, 2100 GMT, as we do every Friday. So if you would like to give these radicals a whirl, practice up, show up, and sign up. And if you make the top split, you can appear both on RaceSpot TV and the official iRacing YouTube channel, alongside some of the best Radical drivers in the world. So Ron, this is a fantastic track, Portimao. Lots of really fun elevation changes, as you're seeing here, and some very challenging corners, and a couple of low speed corners these drivers are going to be powering out of in second gear. And in one of these kind of peaky 4-cylinder turbo cars, it requires patience rolling on the power.
Yeah, this is a car that rewards patience above anything. If you can kind of handle it with kid gloves, so to speak, just say, okay, look, I'm here for you. Everything's going to be all right. Let's just take it easy and slowly work ourselves up. Then you're fine. If you want to treat this car like a punching bag, that's when the car itself is going to treat you like the punching bag instead. This is a car that needs a little bit of finesse, and this is a racetrack that needs a bit of finesse as well. Lots of high-speed sections, the medium-speed turns, and certainly a heck of a lot lot of elevation. The weight transfer is going to go crazy here today, and in these SR10s, the weight transfer can be a little bit tough, but there's one thing that I'm keeping my eye on. We saw it with the weather graphic, and I will raise this up yet again because it's going to be tricky. The weather today with howling winds, 16 miles an hour, the current wind speed at the moment. I believe that works out to about mid-20s kilometers per second, kilometers per hour, I should say. Yeah, 25 kilometer per second winds, we would have a big problem. But no, the winds very, very high today here at Portimao, probably the highest that we have seen thus far this season. And track temperatures not looking too great either, at about 67 degrees Fahrenheit. So these drivers, as much as the setup may be looking a little bit more in their favor, I think the track conditions themselves may be a little bit rough for these competitors.
Yeah, the track very, very greasy with these type of conditions. Portimao pretty close to the ocean, and you see that heavy fog and high humidity, which is not doing these drivers any favors in terms of grip. And here comes Friedrich down one of my favorite corners. This is turn 15 onto the start-finish straight. You saw him drive a little bit on the yellow concrete on the inside there. That is not an off track. So if you've got this track timed in, you can take advantage of that to give yourself a little wider arc along that through that fast corner onto that critical long pit straightaway. And we always talk about this, Ron. The slipstream is going to play a role coming out of that turn 15 down that long pit straight, and we're going to have some battling and contested entries into turn 1, which is another very interesting corner, very high speed, just a brush of the brakes, downshift a couple of gears, and thread the needle between a vicious anti-cut curb on the right and a fairly generous track limit situation on the exit on the left. But when you get it right, absolute thriller.
Oh, it absolutely is. Many challenging sections around this racetrack. Some good overtaking opportunities as well. Look at the downhill hairpin of turn number 5 to maybe be a really good spot for these drivers to get some moves done, along with turn at number 8. First few corners, though, maybe a little bit touch and go, especially at the start of this race. And speaking of JR, let's take a look at today's starting grid.
All right, and we kind of talked through qualifying, but there are the results. Andre Castro, who has shown himself time and again to be a master of wheeling these radicals, will be on the pole next to Diego Perez in P2. Then it's Sauli Reitinen lined up next to Andreas Friedrich. Friedrich looking good here in qualifying at Portimao. Then it's Christoph Lipp lined up next to Havard Gullikson in row 3. That will be followed by George Gonzaga next to Adrian Rostang in 7 and 8. Then it's Ole Gullikson next to Adrian Perignon in 9 and 10. Pedro Temiladri in P11 will line up next to Damian Struthers in P12. Then it's going to be Mark Winfield next to Daniel Williams in 13 and 14. Clive Parsons next to Chris Betts in 15 and 16. So pretty good field here, high strength of field as we always get on these 2100 GMT broadcasts. And I believe that the pole sitter Castro is going to have the outside run into turn 1, and we are underway. Castro getting a pretty good launch here. Everybody staying pretty calm here on the inside, although that is Friedrich there getting smoked by Perez off the start. So it's Castro from Perez from Friedrich, and Friedrich dropping one position there off the start.
Side-by-side racing was briefly going on involving Andres Friedrich and Sauli Reitinen. Now as they head their way off through turn number 4 down this small little flat-out section into 5. This downhill braking zone can be very tricky, but just inviting enough to go for a move. Speaking of, down the inside there was Havard Gullikson, your race winner from last week's 2100 GMT broadcasted race at Belle Isle. He looked to try and get a move done early, as here's Andre Perginen with a moment heading off through into turn number 3. The problem with the opening series of corners, especially in these SR10s, don't really have a single point to breathe through the opening section around this racetrack. So a little bit surprised that we only saw one driver get hit by that bullet, but as we jump back to the front, Andre Castro not really able to shake off Diego Perez right behind.
Yeah, and I got to correct myself. I think Friedrich actually gridded in P4, so he was threatening to get 2 positions there off of that start, settled into a P3, so that is a net gain of 1 for Friedrich. So it's Castro from Perez, from Friedrich, and yeah, that little incident run in turn 1. I agree with you that it's a pleasant surprise that only one car had a problem there. These cars come off the standing start, ice cold tires, no anti-lock brakes, as I said. So takes a couple laps for the tires to hit their sweet spot. So the first couple laps really require the patience that we were speaking about in the intro.
See, as much as this track is certainly a challenge, I'm thinking about it more and more, and I've realized the track that these drivers were racing at last week, Belle Isle. Now, Belle Isle, a track that has unfortunately gone the way of the dodo bird in real life. It's still in use in the sim, but doesn't get a whole lot of use there either, as it's not part of base content, I believe, as that's Andre Castro with a bit of a wiggle. Perez gonna try and get a move done. He's gonna look for the outside as they head their way down to 5.
Yeah, Castro, you saw him getting a little bit loose there. It's a very tough uphill left-hander where the car gets light right over the crest, right where you're wanting to put the power down. You saw Castro fighting for grip a little bit there, and Perez had a run there, but Castro able to close him off into the hairpin.
It's a nice defensive drive from Andre Castro as he headed his way off through turn number 4 and 5, able to hold on to that spot for now. Keyword being for now, may see a little bit of swap-a-roo between these two between now and the end of this race. But just to wrap up on the sidecar that I was bringing up at the start of this lap, we think about Belle Isle. That track is so incredibly bumpy. Back when there were 2 IndyCar races there every single weekend during the IndyCar season in June, the drivers used to talk about how they'd get blisters on their hands running around there. Of course, these drivers having to rustle SR10s on iRacing, a little bit different than real-life IndyCar drivers running around that circuit. But the point remains, that track, absolutely brutal. So as much as Portimao isn't exactly a cakewalk either, compared to compared to Belle Isle, I should say, these drivers are going to be feeling so much more comfortable this week compared to last.
Yeah, I will second that. I had the misfortune of appearing in the Radical Americas Championship race at Belle Isle on Sunday. And Ron, here comes Reitinen. He's going to go down the inside of Friedrich. Strong move by Reitinen, and Friedrich thinking better to fight that one too hard. He overshot that turn 3 a little bit. Very, very tight. The first of a sequence of very tight corners at the first part of this lap, but very strong move there by Reitinen. Good for P3, and he gets a little smooch for his efforts there by Friedrich coming out of turn 5, the second hairpin. And battling, staying thick here up front. Cars packed together really nicely here on, and we're in for a great race. Only lap 3 of 15 so far.
Oh, that we absolutely are. Turn 5, as I kind of hinted at right before we got into this race, going to be a fantastic overtaking opportunity all throughout it. Here's another sleeper pick for a good overtaking opportunity. It's turn number 8. That hairpin, a little bit tricky with a curve in the braking zone. Actually, my apologies, that's turn 11. There's very similar corner to that a little bit earlier on in the lap. That is turn 8, but turn 11, a good spot to maybe get a move done as well. We'll just have to see where exactly these racers can go for the overtakes. This is a momentum-based track. You've got turn after turn after turn after turn. You think of the straight line blasts around this track, the ones that last a little bit long enough for you to really catch your breath. You think of the start-finish straightaway, obviously, which is disproportionately longer compared to every other part of the racetrack. And then you think of the run between 4 and 5. Outside of that, these drivers are always battling something. So I think the main battle will be going on between these drivers and their relationship with this track, along with the battling between competitors.
Yeah, and you see Christoph Lipp there at the absolute edge of adhesion there on that exit of turn 1. I told you that runoff was fairly generous right there, and Lipp using every bit of the track that you can, but obviously very bumpy across that curbing, and Lipp fighting for traction right there. Ooh, and Gullickson there, speaking of Lipp, almost got a little lip on his rear there, as you see Lipp and Gonzago closing down on Gullickson. And look at those gaps, my goodness. Castro and Perez have driven off a little bit, but that train behind Reitinen for P3 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cars covered by about 2.5 seconds. So the fight is on here at Portimao.
Yeah, these drivers really getting physical, which they can't do too much here in these very aero-sensitive Radical SR10s, but they're breaking out the elbows. They're getting physical, and down into turn number 5, we've seen a decent amount of it already into the heavy braking zones around this racetrack. These drivers packed in like sardines, getting very close, making a little bit of front to rear contact, seeing more kisses and a drunk grandma at a family reunion. As here we go, that's a dive off into turn number 13 from the driver in P13, but a spin for Struthers as he heads his way through there.
Oh, and car number 13, corner number 13, an unlucky combination there for Struthers. And here we go as we begin lap 5 of 15. Back to that train. That's right in from Friedrich, Gullikson from Lip for Gonzaga, all fighting for the third step on the podium, staying nose to tail so far. But I'm getting some racy vibes off of this group, and I don't think those drivers are going to be content staying where they are. Friedrich had been as high as P2 and lost his P3 that he had for a little bit. Now he's back in his qualifying position, but pretty good race going on right there. That's Havard Gullikson, the meat in the inert racing team sandwich. Friedrich, Lip, and Gonzaga, all teammates there, and may have an opportunity to work together to thwart Gullikson's attempt to get through here, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. Great stuff here so far, though.
It's a very strange inert sandwich as you've got two pieces of bread at the bottom. Christoph Lipp and George Gonzaga holding on to P6 and P7 at the present moment, trying to chase down Havard Gullikson. Now, it's a competitive rivalry to be sure, but a rivalry nonetheless between the IGL Coatings team. You can see Havard Gullikson in that very striking IGL Coatings green and white paint scheme. See a lot of those drivers make their appearance here in these races, and the inert team as well. Strong competition between those two, both here in these officials and also over on the Radical European side of things as well in the league races that we cover here in Race Spot sporadically on Sundays. That was Persian with a moment heading off through turn number 5. They've had another moment this time. My apologies, that's George Gonzaga we brought on board now down into P7 currently in the number 6 car. You can see this wild ride off through the back end of this racetrack, really the whole racetrack period. This track in terms of elevation change packs a huge punch.
Yeah, and you could see that great in-car there in Gonzaga's car. You see those revs climbing into the red zone in 6. Those radicals are flying down that long pit straight. And just a shout out to Dom's little-known brother there, Adrian Perignon. He is shaken, not stirred, but he's looped that radical a couple times here, and he may be one of those drivers who is attracted to Algarve and doesn't have kind of the specialized experience that you need to be successful in these SR10s. As I said, they definitely can be a handful. And meanwhile, up front, driving off, Castro and Perez, and it is not unusual to see Castro drive off at these events, but hats off to Diego Perez, who is hanging right with him. He's got that gap maintained about a half a second, and it's Perez's job right now to make sure that that gap stays about where it is in the infield section so that he has a crack at Castro down the long pit straightaway. And here are a couple of those corners that just require massive patience. It seems like you're waiting forever right here to roll on the power in second. And now the downhill dash back onto the pit straight, and Castro has stretched that out just a little bit, but watch that gap in our timing tower, upper left of your screen, 0.5. Castro will weave to try to break that slipstream. Now it's down to 0.4. Now it's into the 0.3s. So slipstream very powerful in these SR10s.
And briefly dipping down to the 0.2s as they had their way down there. And speaking of 2s, we got 2x2 and 3 wide down into turn number 1. Going for the dive there, I believe, was George Gonzaga. May have actually been Christoph Lipp that tried to make it 3 wide as Gonzaga avoided any sort of drama there. Had to dive off the track to avoid making contact with those drivers slowing up. 3 wide racing, though, into turn number 1. These drivers, I love them. They're absolutely fantastic and very great people, too. Sometimes, though, I think they have a death wish as here comes Andres Friedrich trying to sweep around the outside to turn number 5 to jump his way up into P4 from P5 from the driver of the 4 car of Havard Gullikson holding on to that spot right now. They're still close together as they head their way down now into 7 and 8. Will we see a move? We will not. Gullickson and Friedrich remain in tow and breaking away a little bit of a gap from Christoph Lipp and George Gonzaga right behind. I do want to say what I was going to bring up in reference to the two right at the front of the field of Andre Castro and Diogo Perez. We've talked at length about the driver that Andre Castro is, the reigning champion here in the Radical Esports Cup, your winner in the opening round of the season at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park in these 2100 GMT broadcasted races. But he is very talented outside the sim as well. Recently joined BS Hybrid Competition, a team composed of real life and in-sim drivers. I recognize some of the names that you see there. Some drivers in formerly of the W Series racing in there. One driver I recognize, Morgan Burkhardt, from the IMSA ranks in the Grand Sport Porsche car that he was campaigning this past year. Andre Castro, past driver in open wheel ranks here in the United States, and also a driver with some experience in Euro NASCAR and NASCAR Xfinity machinery. Also a Team USA scholarship winner back in 2021. Andre Castro, a driver that we have talked at length in the past here on these broadcasts, being very talented. But Diego Perez, he's keeping tit for tat with him up in the front. We got to commend the drive from Perez in that #1 car, because we don't really see Perez do too much here in the series. I can't remember the last time we saw him, and he's really putting on a good drive and keeping one of the top talents here in this series on his tippy toes.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And if you can stay with Andre Castro, you definitely know how to wield those radicals. And Perez doing a great job here, and some great camera work there as we watch those cars go through one of those difficult low-speed corners. And Ron, right here, this is the section you were talking about before, this 10 and 11, the Portimao complex. To me, this is the most difficult part of the entire track. When you go up that hill and end up on that tabletop, it seems like there's you're going into a parking lot. No brake markers, no visual markers of any kind. Very difficult to be consistent right there, and you can gain or lose a huge chunk of time right there. So mastery of 10 and 11 definitely critical around here, and Castro starting to stretch it out a little bit, and Castro has accomplished what he needed to. He's outside of that 1 second gap and outside of the slipstream. You can keep an eye on it. It's going down a little bit, but nowhere near as fast as it goes down when that interval gets a little closer to 0.5, 0.6. So Castro definitely got done what he needed to there. And let's take a look back at this massive battle for P4. That's Gullickson from Friedrich, from Lipp, from Gonzaga, and you saw that side-by-side near kerfuffle there into turn 1. That allowed Gullickson to break out of that inert sandwich that he had been driving in. Gullickson now about a 3-second gap ahead to Reitinen, who's got a little track day going, but his eyes are behind to Andreas Friedrich. Andreas Friedrich is not shy in the least. If he sees a sliver of daylight, that radical is getting stuffed down the inside. So Gullickson has got to be mindful of the cars behind.
Yeah, imagine being in the position of Havard Gullickson right now. You've got 3 inert drivers running right behind Christoph Lipp, very talented racer, a Radical World Finals champion, actually, who won the Radical World Finals in 2024. Very good racer in these SR10s. George Gonzaga was in the first ever broadcast that I ever did, not only of this series, but just in broadcasting period, way back in March of 2023. He was there in that race, and really, that inert stable is absolutely fantastic. Andres Friedrich, another veteran of these SR10s, just a super, super experienced driver roster that they've got with that team. And I mentioned the rivalry between those two teams. It's a friendly rivalry to be sure, but a rivalry nonetheless. Havard Gullickson looking in his rearview mirror and seeing a train of inert cars. It's basically got to be like being at a picnic and then just seeing a whole colony of ants running right towards your lunch.
The bottom screen, we're back with Perignon, who seems to have been on a recovery drive repeatedly as he's had a couple of spins, but clawing his way back. He's looking forward at Daniel Williams right now, has Williams down to about a half-second gap. We'll see if he can crank that down on that long start-finish straight. And up top, it's Havard Gullickson still from Friedrich, Lipp, and Gonzaga. You see Gullickson weaving there to try to break that slipstream. The gap right now about 4/10. And if Gullickson can keep that gap behind to where it is right now, easier said than done, but if he can, he'll be very good shape for P4. And meanwhile, Reitinen is having himself a track day right now. He's got a 3-second gap ahead to P2, 2.2 gap back to Gullickson, who has his hands full on defense. So Reitinen sitting pretty for a podium right now.
Yeah, Reitinen just running all by his lonesome at the current moment, probably saying, you know what? I'm all right with this. This is better for my level of stress. This is basically like a day at the spa for him, even though we're actually at Portimao. And about the same elevation change as possible. Take that comparison there. Kind of, sort of, not really. I'm not too sure. I'm just giving myself brownie points. But Bard Gullickson holding on to P4. He is going to have to drive the widest SR10 that I think has ever been seen in the history of mankind. If he wants to hold on to that spot, certainly isn't a good spot to do it. I mean, it's good to be the defending driver here at this racetrack. But at the same time, you gotta wonder whether or not teamwork is going to make that dream work with that pack right behind, or if their gloves are going to go off in that inter-team dynamic between Andreas Friedrich, Christoph Lipp, and George Gonzaga. They may be teammates, they may be under the same team banner, but we have seen in the past those drivers will duke it out and take the gloves off at certain points in time in these officials. I mean, as much as some of them are contending for the official series championship, at the end of the day, it's not like they're contending for multi-million-dollar prizes. You know, it's mainly just bragging rights that they fight for here in these races. So keep an eye on those three drivers to maybe have a little bit of a mutiny between now and the very end.
Yeah, no team orders on inert. They are free to race every race, and they do. And Gullickson that time around managed to stretch that gap out to about a full second, but Friedrich slowly chipping away about at that, a 10th here and a 10th there. But not a lot of change, really. Gullickson doing a good job maintaining, and it is tough, Rana. You know, for me as a driver, I always go faster chasing somebody. It's easier for me to find pace and to find speed when I'm watching somebody ahead of me. It's a lot harder when there's nothing but dead space in front of you, which is what Gullickson has. He can see Reitinen a little bit off in the distance, but not really close enough to give him any motivation to pedal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the best way I could describe it, I fully agree with you there, JR. I'm in exactly the same camp. It's basically like the difference between like taking an afternoon nap with or without an alarm clock. If you take it with the alarm clock, you're going to have a target. If you take it without the alarm clock, you're going to fall asleep, and next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock at night, and you may as well just go fully to bed. I am fully with you there in that regard. Whenever I'm behind the wheel, I always want a car in front of me. I want a target to be there. Now, target fixation can certainly be a bad thing, and we're not saying that these drivers have like missile lock or anything with each other, just plow each other off the road. But in a normal just chase, when you're just trying to overtake the car right in front of you or try and get a lot of ground up, it's good to have that car right in front as a kind of a benchmark in a way. Know what you're aiming for, not literally just metaphorically. We're talking about pace, not actually crashing into anybody. Trust me, with my iRacing experience, I do have to emphasize that. But it's a good thing to have a car right in front of you just to know, okay, maybe I'm losing a little bit of time through this section of the racetrack. Maybe I can gain a little bit of time here. Maybe I can actually take a little bit easy through here. It's a good metric to have. It's like having a ghost car whenever you're in qualifying, just knowing what lap time you can set and what where you can maybe find a little bit of time. I'm fully with you there, JR. Having a reference can be a little bit good for you.
Yeah, and it's a good way to get better as well. And when you're on track behind somebody fast, you learn that you're a little quicker in this sector, they're a little quicker in another sector, and you try to combine your skills and end up faster all around, and it's much easier when following. But speaking of following, here comes Perez still hanging with Castro, that gap about 0.7. We are going to see it come down a little bit down this pit straight. Castro will weave a little bit to try to break it, but Castro's got to be feeling pretty comfortable right here. 3 more laps to go, and in what has really kind of been an uneventful one here at Portimao. The last race that we covered here, Ron, was a little bit of a wild one, but maybe making the suspension setup a little more user-friendly has kind of calmed down everything here. And whoop, there goes Daniel Williams. He spent some time driving with Adrian Perignon, decided he wanted to take that radical for a spin, and as I said, you got to be very, very patient on the power, or you'll end up doing that a lot, especially around this track with a lot of those slow second gear corners. Now riding along with Perez, and man, oh man, he is memorizing the back of that Radical driven by Andre Castro, and he's reeled him in a little bit here. I'm seeing a .4 here now, and here's that difficult section I was talking about. You're up on a tabletop, no markers, gotta just do your best. But Perez definitely reeling really nicely here, and if he can keep that gap under .5 throughout the remainder of this lap. Now I'm seeing a .3 as Perez really pedaling now. If he can maintain that gap coming onto the pit straight, I'd like his chances to have a crack at Castro here this time on the entry to turn 1.
Yeah, Perez, I think in that midsection of the race where the gap grew out a little bit between those two, I wonder if he was just trying to save up his tires, save up his stuff as we get closer and closer to the end of this race. Castro certainly feeling the pressure. You can see him weaving like a madman as he heads his way onto that start-finish straightaway, trying to break that draft, not doing too many moves here on iRacing. You get pretty much limited to 2. It's not to have a penalty or anything of the sorts. It's just a gentleman code. You only make a couple of moves trying to break that slipstream. But right now, Andre Castro really feeling the pressure from Perez, peaking at the right time with 2 laps left to go here. The driver currently slotted in P2 as he has been for a decent chunk of this race, has been reeling in this gap slowly but surely, putting in those good times and putting your reigning Radical SR10 official series champion under a whole lot of pressure today. Look at Castro even trying to break that draft coming out of the hairpin of turn at number 5. It's not the longest flat out section between 5 and 8, but you can tell that Castro wants to try and hold on to any single gap that he can get.
Yeah, tenths definitely count, and Castro was probably not too crazy about that interval by the time that got down to the end of the pit straight. I saw the interval go under .3, which is as close as it has been on the penultimate lap here. Castro will get the white flag this time through, but Perez falling off a little bit now. And Ron, yeah, you may have been right. He may have been saving his tires for one big push there, and that push may be over as we're seeing that gap expand back to about a second. And meanwhile, here is that battle, that little mini train here continuing. Lip and Gonzaga have fallen off the back of Friedrich a little bit, but Friedrich still right there with Gullickson, looking at a .4 gap right now coming onto that straightaway, and that is going to plummet due to the slipstream. Keep an eye on our timing tower, and you'll see it dropping. It's under .4 now as the cars behind take some pretty radical moves to try to break that draft. Gullickson safe this time, but my goodness, very, very close. Friedrich had that down to 0.3. And Ron, you mentioned the sporting code, and just FYI, weaving to break the draft is considered blocking by the iRacing sporting code 100% of the time. So you really can't do that. I doubt it gets protested very often, but if you did file a protest, I think that offending driver would get one of those friendly letters from the iRacing email demon.
Don't give me any flashbacks now. I gotta say though, speaking of the drafting game, Christoph Lipp and George Gonzaga, the battle that we saw not too long ago for some of the final spots inside the top 5 and the first couple of spots outside of it has broken up into a 2-2 battle. Havard Gullickson and Andres Friedrich, they've driven off into the sunset, able to really dictate their own battle. And I feel like if this race was double length, they'd have a good shot of overtaking Charlie Wright. But the battling with Christoph Lipp and George Gonzaga, I saw that mad weaving game as they headed their way onto the start-finish straightaway last time by. Absolute insanity. But one driver has been the master of the field right now, and it looks like he's going to get win number 2 for him here in this season. That's Andre Castro.
Yeah, Castro off the pole will come down that pit straightaway for the last time. Diego Perez was game, stayed with him for the entirety of that one, 15 laps, and that is an accomplishment in itself. Perez, nothing to hang his head about, and here comes Reitman. He had a nice track day here at Portimao, and he will lock up the final step on the podium. And Gullickson also fighting off a very, very game Andreas Friedrich. I think Gullickson worked his way up there. Gain of 2 positions from his qualifying position. Not super easy to get moves done around here. Very talented field. A lot of very, very fast drivers. So tip of the hat to Gullickson for what he got done, able to push that Radical up into P4. And a little calmer race, Ron, here than I was expecting. Last time was pretty wild, and this one was kind of nose to tail and not a lot of crazy moves. But we're going to have those final results for you here in just a moment as the last couple of cars come through. And there they are. Andre Castro gets it done easily from the pole, leads flag to flag, and will win this one, followed by Diego Perez and Sauli Reitinen in P3. Then it's Havard Gullikson, followed by teammates Andreas Friedrich, Christoph Lipp, and George Gonzaga. Then Adrian Rostang, Ole Gullikson in P9, Chris Betts in P10, and Betts, the hard charger run, up 6 positions. So good drive today by Betts. Then it's Pedro Temaladri, Adrian Perignon, Mark Winfield, Damian Struthers, Daniel Williams, and Clive Parsons will round out your top split grid at our 2100 GMT broadcast here on RaceSpot. So, man, oh man, that was a pretty good one, Ron. Like I said, not quite as wild as I was expecting, but very good skilled driving to drive those radicals around this track as quickly as these drivers did for a 15-lap sprint.
Yeah, I know, that was a darn good race from all of these competitors. Kept it clean, kept it smooth, and really put on a good race. We didn't see too many bare-knuckle fistfights out there, but, you know, that's a good thing. We are able to see some clean, calm, and collected driving from all of these racers. That new setup here for this fixed setup series, mind you, really helping these competitors out. It wasn't like they're running around with rear shocks that most resembled pogo sticks, but a darn good race here today, and I think we have some drivers looking to have a chat with us at the end of this broadcast here, JR. I believe we have a race winner, Andre Castro, looking to have a chat.
Yeah, it looks like we've got Castro outside, Ron, so you're pretty familiar with him and his career. I'll let you go ahead and handle this one.
Yeah, Andre Castro now joining us here in the commentary booth. Andre, welcome in. Your second win in these 2100 GMT broadcasted races here on RaceSpot TV. How was it out there?
Yeah, thanks, John. Diego pushed me all the way, and I feel like I could have broken the draft near the beginning a couple times and just kept making mistakes. So yeah, it kind of made it harder for myself than I needed it to be. But yeah, I think I said in the interview in Canadian Tire that I was hoping, some other people from across the service came in, and I was hoping they would come and into our races. And it's definitely nice to test yourself against not just the regulars, but an 8K driver, obviously really good, and trying out the radical. So it was good to have him in the race and kind of measure myself up against him. But yeah, it was a good battle. Just kind of didn't mess up enough to where he kind of had a chance at me after the first lap. So yeah, just kind of was able to keep a little gap, and yeah, brought it home.
Yeah, bring home the win. Your second win thus far this season, and already getting up to the end of the first half of this season as well. Next time out, going to be ringing in the final race of the first half at Circuit Zandvoort. That is kind of similar to this track in an odd sense. Lots of turns, lots of tight and twisties, and a decent amount of elevation change. What are your thoughts heading to that race next time out?
I'm excited. I think that was, Zandvoort was like my first race in the broadcasted radical splits where I felt, pretty quick, and I ended up winning that one. So that one kind of convinced me to keep going. So that was probably about a year ago at this point, and it's going to be exciting to head back there. It's a good track for racing. You can pass around the outside in some corners. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I have a feeling that the run through turn number 3 is going to be absolute cinema on this broadcast as well. But Andre, before we let you go and celebrate this win, your second win thus far this season, we'll let you give a thanks or shout outs before we let you go.
Yeah, just Chris Wetz, teammate at the top 10 and top split, and yeah, thanks to Diego for running clean and running a good race, and to you guys for the broadcast, and see you all next time.
Yeah, that we certainly will. Andre, thank you for joining us here in the booth. Congratulations on the win, and looking forward to seeing you out there at Zandvoort next time out.
Yeah, thank you.
And that right there was Andre Castro, your race winner here. And doesn't look like we have any more drivers joining us to have a chat here. JR may need to stock up on the snacks in that interview waiting area. But I'll pass it back off to you after a pretty fun race today.
Yeah, and my apologies. I guess I didn't realize who those snacks were for, but they were absolutely delicious, and I'll be more careful around the snack table next week. But as this fantastic season rolls on, as Ron mentioned, our Radical Warriors will head to another oceanside track, the gorgeous Circuit Zandvoort in the Netherlands, and you will not want to miss that one. Ron is right. Who can think of anything better than to see the Radicals on that heavy banking of turn 3? That is going to be absolutely fantastic as 2025 season 4 rolls on. But in any event, folks, that is going to do it. Thank you so much for joining us for today's broadcast of week 5, 2025 season 4 of the Radical Esports Cup. I am JR Gregory. On behalf of myself, my partner Racing Ron Mons, our producer Ramiro Cisneros, and everyone here at RaceSpot TV, have a great Friday and an even better weekend.